Hi class. In this video we are going to start our new topic, which is web development. So you can see I'm on the web development page here, and we're going to be working on this topic for the next 3 weeks. This is going to be a little bit of a new paradigm. So at the beginning of the semester we spent 3 weeks on Photoshop and kind of eased into using a software multimedia editor. And then for audio and animation, we just did a couple weeks since we'd already kind of gone over the basics of that sort of paradigm. We're shifting into a slightly new paradigm today, where we're going to be using a text editor to create a website. So this is very different, and so we're going to take this very slow at the beginning, and then we have a couple weeks to add in everything. So I'm going to introduce the project a little bit in this video, and I'll give a little bit of background on just generally how the internet works and what a website is and how they fit together. And in the next video, I'll go over the basics of writing HTML, which is one of the web languages that I'll talk about in this video. There's a few links here on the web development page. There's a link to the editor that we're going to use for this project, which is a web-based editor. It's free to use. You're going to sign up and create an account. You don't have to download anything. Everything is going to be in the browser for this project. There's a tutorial here that goes over some of the basics that I'm going to cover in the next video if you want to see it in text. And then there's a bunch of sort of resources that I recommend checking out in your own time. There's a video on the New York Times website about how the cloud works, which is a little bit more advanced in terms of the technologies that I'm going to be talking about in this video, but is what we're used to using today. There's another video on how the web works. There's a couple HTML and CSS tutorials that are very similar to what I'll be covering in the video tutorials over the next couple weeks. There's a cool article that uses kind of an interesting implementation of a website here. And then this is the assignment we're going to be working on. We're going to be creating a choose your own adventure story using a website. I think it'll become more clear why that's the project once we start to learn the technologies. But one of the things that we can do on the internet that we can't do in other types of media is nonlinear storytelling. So we can jump around to different parts of the story. So if you've ever read a choose your own adventure book where it tells you to go to one page for one ending and a different page for another ending, this is the kind of thing that we're going to make. So there's some basic requirements in terms of using some of the basic HTML and CSS things that we're going to learn. As usual, if you want to use images, you can create your own, or you can use Creative Commons or public domain images. And then when we're done, we're going to submit a URL for the published version of the project, and I'll go over how to do that, as well as your code and a short statement, as we have usually done. So now I'm just going to talk a little bit about how the internet works. I'm going to hide my browser for a second and just draw on the screen a bit, but I will probably bring the browser back up to show some examples. But yeah, let's just get into it. So we're going to talk about a little bit of the history of the internet. And this is, compared to your history class, this is a much more recent history, although it has been a while now that we've been in sort of the era of the internet. So we're just going to go over a little bit about how the internet works and where it came from. So I'm going to take a little bit of a circuitous path to talking about the technology that we use today, but I think it's an interesting history. So you can imagine, a long time ago, maybe you remember this, maybe you don't, but before we had cell phones and wireless technology, everybody had a phone in their house that was wired to a central sort of dispatch or service. So you can imagine, let's draw an old telephone. So you have, a little dial where you could dial the numbers, and then you have the receiver, and this would be connected into a central service. And if you wanted to call somebody, you'd look up their number and dial it and send it to the service, and the service would go out and look for that number, and they'd find some other telephone over here. It's not a very good drawing, but you get the idea. And this telephone over here, it would ring, and they would connect a line here. And in here, they might have like a big board, and they might, connect this line to this line with another wire. So this is all before we had wireless technology. And the way that the telephone worked is, you'd have a person over here, and you'd have a person over here. And once they got connected, this person would talk, and that their voice would get converted into a signal by a microphone in the telephone. So remember when we were working on audio, you'd have a little signal, and that signal would travel across this wire and across this wire and across this wire. And then let's imagine that this is the, let's say this is the speaker end, and this is the microphone end. Same thing over here. So then that line would come out, and we'd hear it out of this speaker, and we'd start the process in the other way around. So that's basically how telephones work, and the early versions of the internet worked on the same technology. They actually used phone lines to send digital information instead of analog information like your voice. And so what we can imagine is, instead of having a telephone connected here, you would have a computer. So we can get rid of this telephone, and we would be connected to a little computer. Of course, back then, we didn't have little computers, we had big computers. And then this would connect to some other big computer. I'm just drawing a laptop just because it's easier to draw. And now, instead of sending an analog signal of somebody's voice, the computer is sending a digital signal. So it's just either 1 or 0, and it's just going to look like that, and it goes like that. And so that gets sent across here and connected through here and sent across here, and this computer on the other side understands this binary signal, and it interprets it, and then it draws whatever information is being sent on the screen. And so this is basically how the very early version of the internet worked. The reason that the internet was first created, or one of the main sort of driving forces behind it, was actually military intelligence during the Cold War. So there's a lot of people, researchers and different people, who are interested in this idea of a distributed network. But it was the first version of the internet, which is called the ARPANET, was developed by a combination of academic labs in the US and military research centers. And the basic idea here was, if you could imagine, like, one of the big labs was USC. It's a college in Southern California. Berkeley was another one in San Francisco. Then there was MIT over here in Boston. We're imagining this is the entire country. Then we had data centers in Washington, D.C., and New York and other places. And the idea here is, how could we, if we had some really important information, let's say we had it in DC, let's say we had like a bunch of information, and it was really important that this information, not get lost. And the worry was, during the Cold War, that, Russia could attack with an atomic bomb and wipe out DC overnight. And so the plan basically was, we take this information and we make copies of it that exist in all of these different places. And so this is called a distributed network. And the idea here, distributed just means that something is in multiple places, and network just describes when you have a connection, not just between two places, but between multiple places. So Berkeley's also connected to MIT, Berkeley's connected to USC, USC is also connected to MIT. Although the way the internet works, one of the smart things that they do is, instead of, if this line is really long, let's connect through DC instead. So there's a lot of really smart technologies that make the internet work the way it does. So another thing that's happening at the same time as the internet is getting popular, or during the 20th century, is we have TV. And TV is an interesting model because it's it's also a network, but it's not a distributed network. So the way that TV works is, let's say you have, your station, let's say you have ABC or, CBS, whatever here, and then you have TVs. Okay, so you have a bunch of TVs around the world, around the country, and, ABC sends out a signal and it goes to all these TVs. Okay, so this is not a distributed network. This is a centralized network, and essentially ABC gets to decide what goes out, but none of these TVs can say anything back. They only get to receive the information. So the way that the internet works is that it's a distributed network, so that not only does each node in the network is able to send out information, it's also able to send it back. And nodes in the network, or computers in the network, are connected not only to the center, but to each other. So that's basically how the technology works. And what was really useful or interesting about this technology was really for academic research, because basically it made it really easy for researchers to share information. So, if you have people in France and people in the US and people in China, or wherever, all these different countries are doing research, and it could be on anything. It could be on physics, it could be on computer science. Instead of having to all meet somewhere to talk about what they're working on, they can share stuff on the internet, and so everybody can be connected. You have a paper that says, I discovered this cool computer science thing, and then everybody can immediately see that paper without having to send it through the mail or read it over the phone or go to a conference where they all discuss it. And so that was very, very powerful in terms of increasing the speed of research and increasing the way that people were able to share knowledge. The other thing that's really cool about the internet is that within a website, you can link to other pages. And so I'll show you guys for a second the first website that was ever created, because you'll see it's kind of interesting to see what that looks like. So if we just Google first website, as long as we spell it correctly. This is the first website ever. You can see there's a couple things that probably stand out. One is that there's no colors. You might also notice that there's a bunch of blue pieces of text, and there's no images. So the first basic idea of the website incorporates two ideas. One is the internet, and you can see this version of the internet is called the World Wide Web. And this is still the version of the internet that most of us use today. There are multiple different versions of the internet, but this is the one that most of us are on, most of us are using when we check our Gmail or go on Instagram or whatever else we use it for. The World Wide Web, the guy who came up with this idea is this guy, Tim Berners-Lee. He was just a researcher. I think he's either Swiss or French or something. You could probably Google that. Let's go ahead and Google that. Tim Berners-Lee. Let's see. Oh, he's English. Okay. Sorry about that. Anyway, the World Wide Web was his idea, and it's still the governing body of the World Wide Web is still the W3C, or the World Wide Web Consortium. So W3 is World Wide Web. And they're still the people who basically make decisions about what technologies get used on the internet, how the internet is implemented. So you can see with this website, the other thing that's interesting besides the fact that it's distributed is that there's links. And so links, or hypertext, was one of the technologies that got bundled into the internet that made it really powerful, because when you were writing a research paper, you could link directly to your sources. So you could link to something instead of referencing it and somebody has to go look it up, you can just link to it. So you can see on this website, they have, some basic links, which are just these blue text. This is something that we'll learn in the next video. But that's really it. That was really all that the internet was when it was first created. So obviously the internet, developed in lots of different ways. There's no shopping cart on here. There's no videos. There's no images. There's no games. All of this stuff got added to the internet over the last 32 or 33 years. This website is from 1991, and that's when the internet was first available. So now that we have wireless technology and we have all this different stuff, the internet is no longer, held on cables. Instead, we use servers. So you've probably heard the term server before. Basically, all of the big companies like Amazon and Google, they have these big warehouses. We used to have our own servers. Like in my first job, there was a big server stack in our office, and we were, responsible for maintaining it. And that's where all our code lived, and our projects lived, and our website lived. And we would actually serve the website to the rest of the internet. But we don't really do that anymore. You have Amazon, you have Google, you have Microsoft. They all have these big data centers that are just filled with little computers that don't have a screen, they don't have a keyboard, they don't have a mouse. They're just receiving requests and then sending out information. So we have servers and then we have clients. So these are our servers over here. And then we have clients. And clients are anything that receives information from the internet. So that could be your phone, that could be your laptop, that could be your tablet, whatever device you use. And basically what the client does is it makes a request. And so usually the request, if we go to Amazon.com, this is like an address, and it's actually very similar to your address in the real world. It's basically what it really stands for. The Amazon part, this is called a domain name. And this is just like a name that you use to describe a place. But what this actually describes is a series of numbers. So the number might be like 12.34.56.78. That's obviously just an example, but this is called an IP address. And basically, that's just a unique address that points to this specific server. And so when you make a request and say, I want to go to Amazon.com, this is going to go to this address. So it's going to find this server, and it's usually going to take a route. Like, if this is in, let's say that's in Seattle, and we're in New York over here, it's probably not going to go straight there. It's probably going to go to somewhere close by. Amazon probably has servers in a lot of different locations. So maybe this goes to, Buffalo or something like that. I'm just making that up. I don't really know where Amazon servers are. But they'll see if they have information. They might make a request over to Seattle. They're going to find the information that we're looking for. And once they find that information, they're going to send it back to our phone. So when you go on Google, when you go to Instagram and you search for something, or you go to a website, this is the process that's happening. Your client is requesting some information. The server is going to find that information, and then it's going to send it back to you. So that process involves a few different technologies. And these technologies are referred to as protocols. A protocol is basically just like a secret password, but for data. So with a protocol, essentially it's just like a standardized way of talking. So remember, we talked about how we have these computers talking to each other now across this network. And computers don't speak English. They can't say, hey, are you the right computer? And so they need protocols to know how to talk to each other. So this, one protocol might say, hi, whatever, computer language, bleep, 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 bloop, bloop. And the other computer would say, okay, yes, I understand that. And so send me the rest of your information. So there's a lot of different protocols. The one that we use the most is called HTTP. That's why if you've ever looked at your browser bar, you'll see that there's an HTTP :// or now these days we put an S, which stands for secure. But every single website that we use most of the time starts with that address. Let's take a look at that just so we can see it. Because one of the things that's funny about modern browsers is that they often kind of obscure this, but you can see here, we don't actually see that HTTP here, but if I hit on the keyboard, now you can see right there at the beginning, HTTPS. And so that's the hypertext transfer protocol. And hypertext, so that's the hypertext transfer protocol. And hypertext just means those links. So remember we looked at those blue links. You guys have all used links when you use the internet. Hypertext refers to those types of links where we can link to different documents. And then transfer is just distributing or sending those pages around. And then protocol is our protocol. So there's a lot of other protocols, but that's the main one that we use. Okay, so then the last thing that we want to look at for now is the technologies that we use on the web. And so we're going to learn all three of these technologies, but we're going to learn them over a series of weeks. So I'm just going to talk about the basics, and then we'll learn how they actually work in future videos. So our three languages that we use on the web are HTML, CSS, and JavaScript or JavaScript. So the one we're going to learn this week is HTML. This stands for hypertext. So just like our HTTP, hypertext markup language. So markup means this is not a classical programming language, and I'll talk a little bit more about what that means when we learn JavaScript. But markup basically just means this is a way of creating a document. So you've probably written Word documents before. You've probably written Google Doc documents before. All of these different things are just documents. And markup refers to the way that we organize the information. So when you have a document, you usually have like a title or a header, and then you have some paragraphs, and you might have, an image, different things like this. Markup, I deleted my thing by mistake. Okay, so let's go back. So we're talking about HTML. Markup. We don't really need those other ones, so let's keep going. So you have a title, you have some paragraphs, and then you might have images, you might have other stuff. This is markup. What markup does is it organizes the content. It says where to show the title, where to show the text, where to show the image, and we use HTML to do that. We're going to go over that in the next video, so I'll go into a lot of detail about how we write HTML. But that's the basic first thing we're going to be able to do is we're going to be able to make simple documents with some basic properties, and then we're going to have them link to each other. So that's the main difference between HTML and other languages is I can link to another document. So links are a big part of what makes HTML and the internet powerful. Okay, so that's a good intro. Just to quickly mention, so CSS is for styling. So our first websites are going to be very boring. They're not going to have any colors. They're not going to have any image, or they will have images. They're not going to have borders and fonts and all the stuff that we're used to on a website. So we'll learn that starting next week. And then JavaScript is for functionality. So that's what we use for validating a password or adding posting something online. All the functionality stuff of what a user does is enabled through JavaScript. Okay, so in our next video, we are going to go over HTML. We'll go over some of the basics, and we'll create a very simple website.